Welcome to Exploring the Immune System with Russell, which is me. And many people, before listening or before I share with you, I think I should explain why I was interested in this topic. So, my interest started during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, I was just really interested how COVID worked and why people died or were injured from it. And so I just did a bit of research and I found the immune system and it was really interesting. So I'm just hoping to share this knowledge with you. Okay, so the first part is the overview of the immune system. To first talk about it, I need to explain what it is. So, what is the immune system? The immune system is a complex system in your body that protects you from pathogens, which you could see in the graph down here. There's two types. There's the cellular, in other words, living, and acellular, which is non-living. So there's the parasites, which is like snake thing that sort of just uses your energy to live. And a very important one called prokaryote, which is like the big family of the bacteria, which all of you should know. And there's also virus, which is like COVID-19. So it also has two main parts, the of the immune system, the innate and the adaptive. So what is the innate immune system? The innate immune system is the immune system part of your body that you were born with, and it's also the first responder to pathogens and to prevent pathogens. So over here is the type of white blood cells, which is what like teachers would mention when they talk about immune system. Split into two parts, granulocytes and agranulocytes. And granulocytes are the innate immune system, and the agranulocytes are the adaptive immune system. But the monocyte is actually part of the innate immune system. So, what are granulocytes? And why are they named that? Granulocytes are part of the innate immune system, as I said before, and they are called this because they have granules, which are like small particles of enzymes, which is just proteins that break down material. So, like, you could think about it like acid and like a brick. So then the acid will break down the brick, and you can think of the brick as the pathogens. And so there's three types: the neutrophil, the eosinophil, and the basophil. The neutrophil kill and digest bacteria and fungi is just this thing. It just lives and it doesn't really use your energy or anything. It's just there. And they're most of your white blood cells and are like the first line of defense, which means they appear first. And they're made in the bone marrow, which is like that part in your bones, which it's kind of like soft. It just creates white blood cells. And eosinophils attack parasites, which are those snaky things, and cancer cells. And they're often involved in allergic responses, which is like you eat something that you're allergic to or like touch, and then you just get these allergic responses. And they're actually used in a lot of things, like from moving to inflamed areas, which is kind of the red bumps that you have in an infection, trapping substances and dealing with allergies. It's also a type of granulocyte, and yeah, there's basophils, and they just detect the infectious things, which is just the pathogens, and they could release histamine, which is this chemical that makes all your like muscles just contract, and they are meant for allergens, which are the things that you're allergic to, rather than like infections or viruses. From what I know, it's also used to fight parasites. In the monocytes, they break down bacteria by digesting them, and they also remove the dead cells and surround and kill the microorganisms. Microorganisms are just them, they're super small living things. And it's made in the bone marrow. Even though it's agranulocyte, it's still considered as the innate immune system because it can morph into many different things, like the macrophage, which just also eats things. Also, here's a small fun fact. So whenever a teacher says that this white blood cell is eating a like virus, it's usually talking about the granulocytes because it's digesting or in other words, just eating it. And then there's the adaptive immune system. It's the second part of the immune system. And the name says that suggests that it adapts and is which is exactly what it does, and it adapts to the different kind of pathogens that goes into your body. And quick review, a pathogen is like a harmful like microorganism that enters you. And it creates like certain weapons to defend against it. For example, antibodies, T cells, B cells, and more. And vaccines are usually used to boost this part, and it just gives a small dose of the pathogen so then your immune system can learn about it and adapt to it. Because the lymphocytes are part of your immune system. So there's three types of them. There's the B lymphocyte, the T lymphocyte, and the natural killer. So B lymphocyte transforms into the B cell, which makes antibodies. And T cells help kill tumor cells, and there are more from T lymphocytes. And they also control immune responses. And the third type, the natural killer cell, which it limits spread and damage of tumors and infections. Basically, they just kill the infected cells to limit the damage. And once again, these lymphocytes are agranulocytes. Okay, antibodies. These are the Y-shaped proteins made by the B cells, and they're mainly used to identify viruses and marking them for destruction. They're really small and there's a lot of them in your blood, and they basically just latch on to the virus or bacteria. And then since we'll talk about this like in a little bit, um, since viruses have this like receptor, which you could think of like a key, the antibody sort of connects to that key, so then the virus can't infect anything. And next part, viruses. So what is a virus? A virus is a microscopic parasite, and that means it's super small and it lives off you, and it can only reproduce in a host, which is you or any other animal. So it's determined as dead because it can't reproduce by itself. And there's four different types of viruses, which the first one is called the helical viruses. It's a cone with like an outer shell, and there's RNA in it. And in all these graphs, you'd see capsid, RNA, DNA, and all that thing. RNA and DNA is just the instructions for the cell, and the capsid is like the um, outer layer. And so the polyhedral viruses have DNA, the capsid, and also the glycoprotein, which is actually new. The glycoprotein is like what I was talking about before, the key and the lock. The glycoprotein would be the key. And then there's a spherical virus. So these are just like balls with those glycoproteins, the keys, on top of the capsid with the RNA inside. So this is the type that uh, coronavirus is. So yeah. And then there's the complex virus. So it looks like not real because it seems really complex. But there's many types like the bacteriophage, which is this like really cool virus that infects bacteria and essentially just kills the bacteria. It's also considered as harmful. But how does the virus enter you? It can enter through like the eyes, nose, mouth, or skin. And for the skin, it's usually cuts and can come in forms such as like a sneeze, like in the diagram on the right here. So someone coughs or sneezes, and then the particles go into the eyes, nose, or mouth. And someone breathes it in, and then they get infected. So how else could the infection spread? So physical contact is also another one. And so one person gets the virus, he or she like sneezes as part of like the reaction to defend against viruses. And viruses sort of take this chance to travel to another person. And when it gets in, how does the virus infect the cell? Some viruses, such as the spherical and the polyhedral viruses, have a protein spike or the glycoproteins I was talking about, and they go connect to certain cell receptors. You can think of it like a key, and the cell membrane is the door. And after the virus connects, the key connects to the door, the cell gets tricked into letting the virus in. And then it uses the outer membrane and forms like a ball around the virus and just brings it in. And the cell thinks the virus is this cargo. So what does the virus do in the cell? It does multiple things. So first, the cell goes into the virus, and then the RNA or the virus like bursts apart. And the RNA, as I said before, was like instruction. So the instruction goes into the nucleus, which reads it, and then it makes copies of the RNA, and then sends it to the cell parts that produce proteins. And then the proteins are put together to form a virus. And then the cell bursts because there's too many viruses inside. And then, yeah, the cell gets killed. And then the cells around it, around the dead cell, would be infected from the viruses from that cell. And so maybe that's a bit too complicated. So here's a better way, maybe to make into like an image. You could think about like a construction place, and there's this person who wants to build um his own houses instead of working together to build the normal house. So then he tricks going in using this fake key, and then he gives those instructions using like the fake key because the key was supposedly a like person who supposed to know what they were doing, so then just gives them the instructions, and then the workers just start making those bricks and putting them together. But then when there's too much of the wrong house, the whole entire thing will like collapse because there's not enough of its own products. Okay, so there should be a let's summarize everything that we learned. So there's the immune system, which is split into two parts, the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. Each one has many cells and is very complex, but works together to as like a mini army to protect our body. And there's the viruses, which are just the tricksters who just their way into your cells and try to take over as many cells as possible. Thank you for listening, and next time I'll be talking about bacteria and also explaining other pathogens. Once again, thank you for listening. See you next time.